Ba 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 woo ba 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 woo ba 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 woo da 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 da. John Williams is just the GOAT when it comes to film composers, isn't he? Hello there, Richard the Film Geek here, and I'm here to give you guys a special double review of 2 live European concerts headed up for the first time by easily one of, if not my absolute favourite Hollywood composer of all time himself, John Towner Williams, to mark his turning 92, namely one in January 2020, before the pandemic hit, where he collaborated with the Vienna Philharmonic, as well as ace German classical violinist Anne Sophie-Mutter, and the other one a couple of years later, in which he collaborated with the Berlin Philharmonic to celebrate his 90th at the time. And both concerts pretty much do what they say on the tin. In other words, all you really need to know in terms of what both concerts are about is that you have the Hollywood maestro himself, John Williams, conduct these 2 orchestral performances, both in front of a live audience and both specially recorded for 2 of the biggest selling orchestral classical Hollywood music albums of all time, which on a side note were both just incredible for me to listen to, as well as essentially take us on a musical journey through 7 decades worth of iconic film scores he's done, such as Jaws, E.T., Superman, Jurassic Park, Harry Potter, Indiana Jones, and of course Star Wars, and also allow us to celebrate and really appreciate not just the many childhoods he's defined and enriched through his work, not just the indelible mark he has had on Hollywood and many film composers working today, but also the massive impact his work has had on popular culture, period. Now, before I dive into the actual review, I just want to preface that the reason why I've decided to review both concerts together in one video as opposed to reviewing them individually is because A, I had already done the latter in written form on my Letterboxd. B, since this is technically more of a back-to-back review than a regular review, I just felt like doing something slightly different with my reviewing style this time round to see how it works, and most importantly, C, to personally mitigate the risk that reviewing both concerts individually would be a little time consuming. So, with all that being said, here are my thoughts on John Williams live in Vienna and Berlin. Fucking wow. To say that these two live concerts with John Williams are the ones I never would have dreamed in a million years that I always wanted to see, and for them both to turn out to be simply nothing short of amazing and incredible and magical in every possible way you could have imagined, and instantly give you the fantastic feeling of being transported back to when you were a kid all over again, and leave you with the biggest, proudest smile on your face by the end. As well as to say that the man himself surprises literally no one by doubly knocking it out of the park, and further proves why he is and literally always will be the go when it comes to Hollywood film composers working today, would be two of the biggest understatements of the century. You also get the sense that Williams is essentially not just thanking the fans for taking all of his timeless music completely into their hearts, souls, and minds for all these years, but is also rewarding them with these memorable musical experiences that they will never, ever forget. Speaking of John Williams, since after all he is the MVP and biggest star of both shows, you know you have to talk about him first, and especially coming from someone who's been a huge fan of this man's music since early childhood. I feel like I could literally gush about him non-stop, and I know I'm probably going to devote quite a large chunk of this review to basically expressing why I love this guy and why, even in my book, he is the undisputed king of all film composers, and rather deservedly so. But honestly, what else do I really have to say about John Williams that hasn't already been said? He is literally right up there with some of the greatest film composers in Hollywood history, including Max Steiner, Miklos Rozsa, Leonard Bernstein, Ennio Morricone, James Horner, Jerry Goldsmith, and Bernard Herrmann. He is a living legend. He is a film score god, a genius. The modern day Beethoven, Debussy, Stokowski, Stravinsky or Mozart. He is basically the Yoda or Albus Dumbledore of film composers working today, an absolute master wizard of his craft who could literally do no wrong in my eyes. He is the proverbial genie out of the Hollywood lamp who, with just one wave of the baton, has the power to audibly transport you to the most extraordinary places through his music. Speaking of which, a mammoth majority of his scores in particular, such as Jaws, Superman, Jurassic Park, Indiana Jones, the first 3 Harry Potter films, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Star Wars, Saving Private Ryan, Schindler's List, etc., have all very rightly gone down as some of the most timeless, legendary, influential, and iconic in film history. I mean, seriously, if you don't find it all the more inspirational that this man still continues to be at the top of his game at 92 years of age and yet shows no real sign of slowing down anytime soon, then I really don't know what is. Plus, you can tell with the biggest smile on his face, as well as his subtle use of body language, the rare twinkle in his eye, every slight nod of the head, again, every wave of the baton, and every subtle hand gesture he makes, that he was clearly enjoying every single second of those performances. I also love the fact that in between his introductions of some of the pieces, Williams basically gives you a little intellectual window into his personality and really allows you to see the true kindness, the humility, the wisdom, the intelligence, the generosity, and just above all, the graciousness with which he is able to command an entire room and allow the orchestra their chance to shine. Speaking of the live orchestral pieces that were used during both performances, some of which are particular personal favourites of mine, such as the Raiders March from Indiana Jones, the Throne Room finale suite from the original Star Wars, The Rebellion is Reborn from The Last Jedi, Luke and Leia from Return of the Jedi, both Hedwig's theme and Harry's Wondrous World from Harry Potter, both Yoda's theme and especially the Imperial March from Empire Strikes Back, Jaws, the Jurassic Park theme, Warhorse, The Witches of Eastwick, etc. Of course, there's no real surprise that they sound just as awesome and iconic as you'd expect them to sound. But of the bunch, the two clear standouts, for me at least, are Flight to Neverland from Hook, which even 33 years since the release of that film still never fails to make your heart literally soar and make you feel like you're in Neverland itself. And my overall personal favourite of both performances combined by far, namely The Adventures on Earth Suite, essentially the whole ending to E.T., which even once you listen to it, and even if you're someone who has or otherwise hasn't watched E.T., and yet you know how that film ends, it never ever loses its special power to make you well up like a baby, melt your heart, and bring many a tear to your eye, as it of course did me during and after it finished. And I'm almost choking up right now thinking about it. If ever you needed one moment that so perfectly sums up and encapsulates how deeply adored, respected and revered by both the Hollywood film industry and film fans in general, John Williams truly is, not just in terms of his massive contribution and influence within Hollywood and how he's practically changed the game when it comes to how the modern film score sounds today, not just in terms of how influential he has been on other great film composers working today, like Ludwig Göransson, Johnny Greenwood, Michael Giacchino, Alexandre Desplat, James Newton Howard, Danny Elfman, Howard Shore, Alan Silvestri, and Hans Zimmer, just to name a very select few. But also in terms of his magical ability to define your childhood by transporting you to the most fantastical worlds, as well as tug at your heartstrings and make you feel a wide range of human emotions through his music. Just take a look at this little clip from the 2016 AFI Lifetime Achievement Ceremony, where longtime collaborator Steven Spielberg pretty much firmly hits the nail on the head for us.
Without John Williams, bikes don't really fly, nor do brooms in Quidditch matches, nor do men in red capes. There is no force. Dinosaurs do not walk the earth. We do not wonder. We do not weep. We do not believe. John, you breathe belief into every film we have made. You take our movies, many of them about our most impossible dreams, and through your musical genius, you make them real and everlasting for billions and billions of people.
And I actually want to utter a similar point to what Spielberg had to say in that little clip. Some of the greatest movies in really modern Hollywood history, like the ones I'm sure to have proudly mentioned multiple times throughout this review. I mean, honestly, how can you not? I cannot even imagine they would be anywhere near as rightly widely beloved and treasured as they are if John Williams did not compose the music, or if, in other words, a lesser talented composer came in and did said music. There is just something about Williams's music that has the special power to transform a scene that would normally otherwise be perceived as not entirely significant or meaningful to the narrative, at least especially on an emotional level, into a true masterwork of cinema. I mean, take, for example, the iconic binary sunset scene from the original Star Wars, where Luke stares out at the twin suns. If you take the emotive musical cue out of that scene, does not exactly leave as much of a memorable or emotionally powerful impression, does it? I mean, all you'd basically get is a young Mark Hamill staring out into a double sunset on a desert planet, and that's basically it. But the moment John Williams comes in and once again waves the baton, you get this. And of course the world is going to feel much darker and much more depressing when John Williams is eventually no longer with us. But at that same token, his legacy is guaranteed to continue to enrich and inspire many a future generation of film composers and or classical composers to come long after he's gone. But both the Vienna and Berlin Philharmonics also deserve huge credit for helping Williams bring these two performances to life, and for certainly proving their worth as some of the greatest symphony orchestras in all of Western Europe, along with the Royal Philharmonic and especially the LSO. You can clearly visibly tell that there was an insane amount of creativity, talent, passion, and artistic excellence within each of the players involved, and also how much of a great time they had being guided essentially by one of their idols. However, all that being said, there are only a couple minor gripes I personally have with both productions. With the Vienna production, it's Anne Sophie-Mutter's rendition of Hedwig's theme I'm just not really the biggest fan of. Just something about that violin solo that, in my opinion, doesn't quite exactly work or mesh as well with a live orchestra, even despite my huge respect for her being one of, if not the most naturally gifted and talented violinist on the planet. Even despite my liking of some of the other violin pieces she did throughout the performance, such as Donnybrook Fair from Far and Away, the Duel from The Adventures of Tintin movie, and Remembrances from Schindler's List. And even despite my admiration for her wanting to be in the company of and work with John Williams. And as for the Berlin performance, funnily enough, it is actually less to do with the actual concert itself and rather more to do with the way the BBC televised it. In other words, it is more down to the BBC's frankly questionable decision to heavily edit the concert down and thus condense the full 2 hours to just an hour and 20 minutes, meaning they had to take out roughly 40 minutes of extra footage, both to meet Christmas scheduling deadlines at the time, as well as apparently due to time constraints, which, even if you're someone who only watched the televised concert as opposed to just listening to the full album, which sadly does not include the main Jaws theme at all anyway, makes for a slightly disappointing experience experience, especially when you don't get to visually see the orchestra playing, for example, the Superman theme, or Princess Leia's theme, or heck, even the flying theme from E.T. anywhere else other than here on YouTube. Fortunately though, those two individual gripes are so minor that they don't at all detract or take away from my profoundly overwhelming enjoyment of both shows. In conclusion, John Williams live at Vienna and Berlin are just some of the most top-notch, amazing, incredible, magical, and above all, immersive productions that honour and celebrate the vast wealth of great film music this man has provided us with for the last 7 decades. If you're a major fan, as I am, of John Williams's music, and or want to see the man himself in action, conducting 2 of the greatest European classical music symphony orchestras in the world, or even a major fan of classical music in general, I would most definitely highly recommend that you check out both of these concerts as soon as you can, whether it be here on YouTube or on DVD, or even if you somehow manage to get your hands on both of the albums. Those albums I will definitely highly recommend to you as well. And with all that being said, as for my individual overall rating for both shows, John Williams live at Vienna gets a 9.5 out of 10. And John Williams live at Berlin gets a 10 out of 10. John Williams continue to provide us with more great film scores in the foreseeable future. So please feel free to do the following few things. Leave a comment below. Let me know your personal thoughts on John Williams live in Vienna and Berlin. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel as always. Click on the little bell where you can get all of the notifications and updates associated with the channel via email. And follow me on Instagram and Letterboxd if you haven't already. Do take care, everyone. And may the force be with us all.